You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly ReQua, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk, and I'm your host, Polly ReQua. Today we're talking to Cindy Meyers, animal listener and intuitive coach. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks for having me on, Polly.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we want to find out more about your business.
Terrific. What would you like to know?
Well, first, tell me about being an animal listener. How did that come about?
Well, I started off actually not working with animals. I worked with humans as an engineer, and then I was working on my master's in counseling, and I picked up a book on while I was in school on how to communicate with animals, and I thought, wouldn't that be cool? And I took the book home and I tried it with my dog, and it worked, and I was hooked from then on to keep trying and practicing and reading more about it, and it was getting alpacas. When I got into the alpaca world, they're so intuitive that practicing with them developed my skills by leaps and bounds. They're great teachers, and just working with them, I got my skills going enough, and people wanted to learn how to do it. So then I started developing courses on how to learn how to do animal communication using them. So it's just been a lot of practice, and when you have your own farm and your own animals that you get to walk outside your 10 steps and you're right with them, you really get very good at developing your intuition.
And once you started working as an animal listener, is that when the intuitive part kicked in?
No, actually, my intuition started even before the animal communication. I started picking up people's pain and emotions in my body, and that was also part of what my studies I needed to understand better, because it was really uncomfortable in the beginning having somebody's headache all of a sudden, or backache, or chest pains, or stomach aches. And so I really needed to understand it so I could function out in the world around people with not feeling terrible every time I walked past people. And so my intuition actually came before the animal communication. The animal communication was just a more fun aspect in understanding the process, because it's way more fun to work with animals than it is with people.
I'm sure. No one can talk back. And so what type of animals do you work with? Do you have
all species? I have my alpacas, but actually most are cats and dogs for most folks, but horses, cows, donkeys, sheep, wild animals, just walking past an animal. I love going to animal sanctuaries and helping out with the animals that are in distress at these various facilities. But it works for any species. Energy is energy. And animals are they understand it. They themselves, that's one of the communication styles that they think is quite natural. They actually think we humans are kind of dumb, because we blow right past a lot of what they're communicating to us because we're not listening. And so that was part of my mission in life, was to help people start opening up to their own intuition and their own abilities to hear what animals are telling us, so that they can be more respectful of the animals.
And so what type of tips can you give the average listener on how to communicate with their pet?
We all can do it very easily, and it's just learning to be more observant. Our animals can communicate a lot with body language. And so once we start learning what the body language is telling us, we can appreciate a little bit more. That will help us become a little more intuitive in just beginning to witness and observe with our eyes. For a dog, for example, they communicate a lot with their ears, their tails, their eyes, and how they position themselves. And so by watching them and what their body is telling us, you can really grasp a lot of information. So watch their tails. If they have a tail, is the tail up? Is the tail tucked between their legs? Those tell you what emotional state they're in.
And do you see patients at your house, or do you do it over the phone?
The vast majority of my clients are all over the country. They're not local. I see very few locally. I live in Oregon. Energy is energy. I kind of talk about, I'm like a walking radar, walking, talking radar. And actually, that's what I did as an engineer. I worked on radars. So that's what I've always been attracted to is that kind of information and how it works. So I communicate a lot with, I'm not only just an empath in which I feel the experiences of what the animal is going through in my body, but I also talk a lot about frequencies because I'm picking up different levels of frequencies and what are blocked and what is flowing right. And I transmit a frequency in helping to unblock the emotions that may be trapped in their bodies. Or once I release them, then I like to balance their energy out so that they're flowing properly. And so I do that with frequencies. So I'll talk a lot about frequencies, but just like your cell phone, how does your cell phone work? You send it, you dial a number and it goes up to a satellite and comes back, and then instantly you're connecting with somebody. I mean, you're located in the Midwest, right, or Colorado, and I'm in Oregon, and we're talking simultaneously through the computer. So there's signals that are flowing back and forth, happening simultaneously, and how my body works is pretty much the same way. I am sending out signals and I'm able to receive them through my body.
So do people contact you if their pet is lost?
Now that's the one area. Yes, I get a few people. I don't have a great GPS.
Okay.
Some intuitives are really good at picking up where a lost animal is. They can tell you, they're on the corner, or they can see the house or something that's really clear. I'm more in tune to their emotional state, so I can tell you. A lot of times when people call me and they say, "Oh my," they're in a panic because their animal's lost. Well, their animal got out. That doesn't mean they're lost. So I can tap into them and find out if they're really lost, or if they're just out on a walkabout adventure. And a lot of times, or if they got out and they may be scared, but they're close to home. So I can tap into them, find that out. And then if they are close to home, if they do know they're home, I can help them go, talk to the animal, communicate to them to please go home, that it's safe to go home, or figure out how to get home. But as far as telling the owner, sometimes I'll see that they might be under something that's near the house. But again, my GPS is just not that honed yet. Maybe it will down the road. So if an animal truly is lost, I'll refer them elsewhere.
And so does the dog or cat or animal, how do they communicate with you? I guess it's kind of interesting just to find out, how are they saying, I can see a tree, I can see a bush, I'm near a fence, and that's what you relate to?
Yeah, well, I relate to them in two ways. One, I'll sense their emotional state. So if there's an emotion that's stuck, that's causing either an emotional behavioral issue or a physical issue, I can sense what that is, and I can identify what emotions are blocked. And then the other thing, then once I start kind of working with them on that level through the emotions, then they'll sometimes send me an image, or a thought will be put in my head, and it's like a single thought. I'm trying to think of a quick example for you. A dog recently was having some troubles, and so with the owner being gone, so I got an image of their bed. They had just moved, and I went, "Oh, is their bed packed away?" And they said, "Yes." Well, I said, "Please find their bed." That will help them. They need that they needed to know that this was their forever home, or their new home, and having that stability of that bed. So they sent me an image of that bed, needed for because the new place, the smells were funny, so they needed that familiar scent of their home, their base, their bed.
So based on when a client calls and they say, oh, my dog is aggressive, do you say to them, this is going to take so many sessions, or do you first communicate with the pet and then figure out a game plan?
Aggression is a little different. I'm very cautious with aggressive dogs, and that I like to have a team working together, because when I replace the emotions that may have created the behavior, just removing it is not enough, because a habit has been created. And so I can help remove the drive, which is the emotions that got stuck or that created the original trauma or fear or experience that created the behavior. But if we don't replace it with something positive, a new habit, then they're just going to default back to the old habit. And so when you have an aggressive animal, it's really important to work with a good trainer so that the new habit can get reestablished. So what I work with on a different kind of behavioral problems, for example, maybe piddling in the house, some experience if the owner goes away on vacation and when they come home, the animal has some anxiety from them being gone, and to let their owner know that they were upset, they start peeing on the furniture or on the carpeting or different parts of the house, and they've taken them to the vet, and the vet said that there's no physical problem. So what I work with then is I'll remove the trapped emotions that created the behavior in the first place. And then sometimes the animal will say, well, it will help me if I have something else instead, to do something else when the owner comes back or while they're gone. Maybe instead of going to the kennel, they said, I'd rather have somebody come to the house. I feel more confident at the house. So we can work on problem solving on what is a better way of handling and getting the animal through so that they don't have the anxiety anymore. And the animal quite often will communicate an image again, or some idea that they might be able to handle whatever the experience is a little bit more calmly.
Great. Well, we certainly appreciate you being on the podcast, and I hope you will come back.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.